Democracy Gone Wild, The Chicago Riot by Remy Musicanto. The 1968 Chicago riot had nothing to do with the killing of Dr. Martin Luther King. That happened earlier in the year. Later in the year, Chicago was also the scene of the anti-war Days of Rage. The 1968 Democratic Convention was the site of the riot. Led by the Students for Democratic Society and Youth International Party, or Yippies, and thousands of other young people came to Chicago to protest the Vietnam War and the Johnson-Humphrey Party leadership, which had populated it. They wanted to camp overnight in Grant Park, which is closed at 11 o'clock like all other parks. When they refused to leave, the Chicago police gave them a helping hand. The next day, as they tried to interrupt the convention, the CPD forcibly put down the demonstrations. The images of violence in the streets, the harsh methods used by the police, and mayhem on the convention floor became symbols of strife over the Vietnam War. In 1968, the police did what they wanted to. This was a bad thing, but that doesn't mean that men were bad. Some were and some weren't. However, at the time, Mayor Richard Daley was a very powerful and influential man among the police, and it was understood that people were going to get hurt or even killed before the hippies and protesters even got to Chicago. The Democratic National Convention.
For Democrats, the Chicago Convention of 1968 was a nightmare. Meeting after the assassinations of Martin Luther King and Robert Kennedy, Democrats fell into chaos, fighting Chicago police and each other.
With George McGovern as President of the United States, we wouldn't have to have Gestapo tactics in the streets of Chicago.
Mr. Daley is not pleased with Senator Rutherford.
How hard it is to accept the truth.
Vice President Hubert Humphrey, hobbled by the unpopularity of President Johnson and his Vietnam War policies, appealed for order.
Surely we have now learned the lesson that violence breeds counter-violence, and it cannot be condoned, whatever the source.
It didn't work. Humphrey's November defeat ushered in the era of Republican presidential dominance, with 7 GOP victories in the last 10 elections.
At the end of April 1986, there was a rally in downtown Chicago. At the conclusion, the police ordered the crowd to disperse, and when they did not do so fast, the police wadded into the crowd with their nightsticks, beating people, and this was bad. In the time in 1968, the Chicago police had a history of picking on African Americans and hippies. There are many reports and stories to backroom beatings, phone booking, nightclubbing, and etc. In 1968, the Chicago Police Department was far from what it is today, which is good and bad. In those days, it was not uncommon to trick an officer to get out a ticket or have them look the other way. The same went for victims of the police and the brutality among a new generation. Plain and simple, the police pretty much did what they wanted. There was more than one riot in Chicago in 1968. In April, following the murder of Martin Luther King, riots broke out in the African American neighborhoods in quite a few cities, including the west side of Chicago. 20 blocks were burned and 9 African Americans were killed. During 1968, when the police were killing all the protesters and hippies, they started to call it the police riot because so many people were being killed and the police would go on a riot. In the end, I feel that it was wrong for Mayor Daley to tell the police to beat hippies, African Americans, or even people from the National Convention, because I feel that it was wrong to beat all those people that just wanted to protest against it.